Welcome into a Tuesday, January 28th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. As always, we are streaming live on the DFO YouTube and brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Tyler Yaremchuk and Matt Larkin filling in for Frank Saravalli, who we're describing as day-to-day. He was a trooper. He was an absolute trooper for about 7 days playing sick, but we finally convinced Frank to sleep and rest for a day. So Matt Larkin slides in. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm good. Frank, if you're watching, go to bed. I'm here as the e-bug. I'm always ready to come in at the drop of a hat, my friend.
Love it. And shout out to Tyler Palmer, the University of Alberta Golden Bears netminder, who was the e-bug on the bench last night for the Edmonton Oilers. Anytime I can work in a U of A Golden Bears shout out, I will absolutely do it. We are looking for your inbox questions over on YouTube. Drop them in with the hashtag askdfo. And while you're there, have a vote on our Dominion Lending Center's poll question. Stephen Ellis is going to swing by in a little bit for the next wave. So plenty to get to tonight on the show. But to kick things off, Matt, let's look at a couple of the results from last night. It's our nightcap brought to you by JP Weisers. JP Weisers is proud to be the official whiskey of the NHL, offering Canadian hockey fans a premium drink choice to enhance every game night experience. The official whiskey of game night, JP Weisers. And let's begin with a struggling team in New Jersey. It is wild to go and look at their schedule over the last month. 2 different 4-game losing streaks. It has not been good, and now they begin life without their Vezina caliber netminder and Jacob Markstrom, who was putting together a remarkable year. But when you consider the fact that they're not going to have Markstrom for a little bit, and you look at the goal scoring here, goals for per game 12th. If you just look at 5v5 goals per 60, they're all the way down at 21st in the NHL. Jack Hughes isn't scoring at a 100-point pace. How concerned are you, scale of 1 to 10, about this Devils team in their recent slide?
I'm going to say a 4.5, Tyler. Obviously, there is a slide. There are some injury concerns. Jacob Markstrom being out, that puts a lot of pressure on Jake Allen. He's in his mid-30s. We don't know if he's really up to that workload. I'm also worried about Nico Hischier. He's hurt right now. He's such an important part of this team, both ends of the ice and as a leader. And 3 of the last 4 seasons going into this one, he missed double-digit games to injuries. That said, you still got a nice cushion in the Metro. Yes, the Devils have played the most games in the NHL, but regardless, still a 7-point gap between them and Columbus. And I'm looking specifically at the last month. And what am I noticing in the numbers? Shooting percentage is really low. It's near the bottom in the NHL. So I do think it's sort of a stretch of bad puck luck. I don't think they're playing terribly. To me, it's about weathering the storm and maybe getting pretty active at the trade deadline. You got to shore up that depth with some middle 6 forwards.
Yeah, I think that's got to be close to priority number 1 for the New Jersey Devils. And it'll be something we touch on with Stephen Ellis. But like, they have this surplus on the right side of their blue line with Nemec and Casey sitting in the minors. And the 3 guys they have, like, they love Jonathan Kovacevic and Pesci and Dougie Hamilton. And it's like, okay, this is a clear-cut, easy trade to make. You decide whether you want to keep Nemec, who I know made some concerns public or complaints public, or if you want to move Casey, you take one of them, get the best forward you can get for him, and give this team a chance to win this season. The other big story from last night was Connor McDavid returning from suspension. He finds the back of the net as the Edmonton Oilers take down the Seattle Kraken and pick up another win on home ice. Good things happen when Connor McDavid shoots the puck, but that's a conversation for another day. When he was on the ice, he only finishes with the 1 goal. When he was on the ice, though, shot attempts were 33-14 for the Edmonton Oilers. He was buzzing last night. And Matt, it wouldn't surprise anyone if off his suspension and his 1-week little vacation here, if Connor McDavid just goes supernova leading into 4 Nations.
I think you're bang on there, Tyler. And if you look at McDavid's career splits, if you can guess what his 3 best months are in terms of point per game, February, March, and April. That is his time where he absolutely cooks. He's 11 points back of Nathan MacKinnon for the NHL scoring lead right now. And if you're placing a bet, I don't know. I just feel like it's coming. You can sense the wave. It's like you're on the beach, you see the tidal wave incoming, and it's the McDavid heater. It's about to start.
Yeah, I think they have 6 more games until the 4 Nations face-off break here, and I'll set the over-under at 11.5 points. Wouldn't surprise me at all if it's 2 points per game for Connor McDavid from here until then. But that was last night in the NHL. As we move forward to today, there's a bit of a story developing, Matt, and the Minnesota Wild. Listen, they're coming off a win. Things were maybe starting to feel a little bit better, although they were still plagued by inconsistencies over the last little bit. And when Kirill Kaprizov was out of the lineup, they could not score. They had like 11 goals over their last 6 games without Kaprizov. It was not good. And now we're potentially getting some news that Kaprizov may need surgery. Bill Guerin is speaking to the media as we are live right now. We haven't heard an update, but Michael Russo is saying that surgery may be more likely than not for Kaprizov, and that would be close to a death blow for them.
Yeah, that's scary for a team that's already, I think they're 7th in the NHL in man games lost. I know Bill Guerin yesterday was saying that it's not an excuse, but they really have been snake bitten. Joel Eriksson-Ek went down, Brock Faber, Jacob Middleton. There's been so many key players hurt at various points. Jonas Brodin. You get Kaprizov back to continue his Hart caliber campaign, and he's immediately hurt. It sounds like he'd still be back in time for the playoffs, but it looks like a scenario where Minnesota is likely to drop now out of that 3rd spot in the Central. You have Colorado coming for them, and that means you're going to have a much tougher playoff matchup. You mentioned the struggling to score, of course, when you're losing that many important players, but also the team save percentage in the last month, 25th in the NHL. Philip Gustafsson was on a heater to start the year. He's gone ice cold. He's given up 4 or more goals in 5 of his last 6 games. So to me, that's just as big of a problem. Goaltending went cold at the same time as the offense, and that's why you're starting to lose some games.
Yeah, and hey, maybe this ties into our poll question ultimately, but if you're Bill Guerin and you're staring down the barrel of, I mean, maybe it's 4 to 6 weeks without Kirill Kaprizov, do you not get a little bit tempted to just pull the trigger on a move now instead of waiting and seeing how the market kind of develops? Like if you like Brock Nelson and he was maybe the guy you had in mind before this Kaprizov surgery news, are you not just going, you know what? New York, what more do you want? You want an extra third? You want me to up a pick somewhere? Let's just get this done so we don't lose a lot of momentum here in the next 4 to 6.
Yeah, I think it accelerates the timeline, and maybe it's still pursuing a Brock Nelson. We've talked about before. He's such a great fit because he could resign in his home state. He's Mr. Minnesota. But also, if it's Kaprizov, you also need to look for a direct replacement on the wing. So do you have to start making calls on players like Oliver Bjorkstrand, someone like that, to replace the scoring on the wings? I also think the Wild, just looking at their lineup, they have the heavy in the bottom 6, but they don't have the heavy skill in the top 6. I always say it's the hardest thing to find. There aren't many players available that have the combination of being a high skill player and also can play a physical game. It could be JT Miller, but that's such a complicated trade to make. So it's a hard piece to find. I do just look at those top 2 lines. I don't think there's enough physicality there. You need a bit more jam. So you got to find it if you're Bill Guerin. Not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's going to be week to week lower body injury. Surgery, according to Guerin, could happen on Friday. So again, that 4 to 6 week timeline, I think, is what is coming out of Minnesota here. So yeah, I mean, that's a big blow. You talk about maybe wanting a little bit of jam, maybe. And again, the cap situation will make this difficult for a team like Minnesota. But if you can make it work, maybe you do a little one-stop shopping. Maybe you get a couple of forwards from the New York Islanders. Like, what about again, money has to be retained pretty heavily to make this happen. But like Brock Nelson, Kyle Palmieri, one foul swoop, add a good middle 6 winger and a good top 6 centerman to the mix, and that forward group looks a lot different.
I agree. And the funny part is, we just don't know if the Islanders are ready to sell or whether they're going to wait till the 11th hour because they got hot. If you're an Islanders fan, you're probably saying, no, please stop winning games because this team is going nowhere. They've been going nowhere for years. It's been really bad under Lou Lamoriello. He's still apparently in denial. And if that means he's going to hold on to his chips longer, then what are you going to do? You can't trade for a Brock Nelson yet. If the Islanders believe silly wise that they have a chance, but I don't know. This is just the way Lou Lamoriello has operated at this stage of his career. So you may have to look elsewhere if you need help right now.
As you can see on the board here, they're 3 points away from catching the likes of Philly and New York. But when you look at the league-wide standings, they're 3 points away from having a top 5 pick if the Anaheim Ducks can catch them, right? So it's like, oh man, on one hand, I agree with you. I could see Lou going, we're right in the mix. I've seen crazier things happen, but if I'm an Islanders fan, I'm sitting there going, even if we get in, what are we losing in 5 to the Washington Capitals? Give us a top 5 pick, add some legitimate skill to that prospect base. And again, it doesn't need to be a long rebuild if you do it right. If you sit here and try to cling to life for the next bit, that's when it could get a little bit complicated. Let's continue along and get to some news from yesterday as Logan Thompson got paid by the Washington Capitals. He absolutely cashes in on his hot start to the season. It's a 6-year deal with a $5.85 million AAV. He's been great this year. And to be honest, he's been good ever since he came into the league. He really is a great story, a guy who really developed in his mid to late 20s here. And now at 27 years old, gets this life-changing payday. But there's a part of me, Matt, who goes, yes, the numbers are great. but he's played 130 games over the last 3-4 seasons here. He's been banged up at some points, and when he's in net, the numbers are good. But we've also seen deals similar to this backfire on teams. We just watched the Pittsburgh Penguins go through what they went through with Tristan Jarry, and that's a guy who led them on playoff runs. Matt, is this a good signing for the Washington Capitals to just say, hey, if he continues this play for the rest of the season, it might have been more expensive, so let's lock him up now, or are they committing a bit too early?
Yeah, it's a great topic. I love it because I've had so many thoughts in the past 24 hours. He's such a good story. Shout out to U Sports, Canadian University athlete. He was traded by the Golden Knights while he was in the building signing autographs, which was quite the knife in the back, if you ask me. So it's great to see him performing so well. He's, I think, at worst, the number 2 candidate for the Vezina Trophy. He actually leads the NHL in goals saved above expected per 60. So you could argue he's been the best goalie in the league on a per minute basis. But I do ask, why now? His career high in starts is 42. $5.85 million. Is that going to be a higher price if you take him to free agency? I don't know if it's going to be much higher for that, given his sample size. I feel like it's maybe a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to the Mackenzie Blackwood signing, feeling like, okay, it's not a robust free agency market for goaltenders. You have Aiden Hill, Carl Vejmelka, but it's sort of a weak free agent class for goalies after so many big names moved last summer. So maybe Washington's trying to jump the market. I just don't understand why they had to do it now. 5.85, I think that's the top of his value, given how few games he's actually started so far in his career. So I don't see the logic in signing it right now. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to his game now psychologically for the rest of the season. He's got his big contract. Will he stay focused? Will he stay hot? I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, another thing too with the Washington Capitals, they have one of the best bargains in the league with Thompson and Lindgren signed for basically $1.86 million. Like, that is insane when you consider that in their LTIR space. I do think it's another reason for that Capitals front office to be going all in this year. Like, you have this team that seems to just be gelling. I don't want to use the term like team of destiny vibes, but everything's going your way. You have these 2 goalies, Logan Thompson playing, like you said, at a near Vezina caliber level. You need to give this team everything they can to try go on a run here. I think you need to take advantage of it because, again, things are only going to get more expensive after this year, and that's evident with the Thompson extension.
Yeah, I agree. Everything is clicked for this team. They don't seem fluky to me at all. They even look like a team that's going to play even better in the playoffs. Guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's had his moment in the past with Columbus, Matt Roy, Jacob Chikrin, they've added so much to that blue line. They're going to be really hard to play against. And to me, they've been a fascinating story. What I'm very curious about now is, what does this deal mean for Charlie Lindgren? Because the scuttlebutt leading up to the Thompson deal was, okay, Washington's going to wait. They don't want to upset the dressing room by paying one, not the other. So does this mean that there's an extension for Charlie Lindgren coming as well? Or are they kind of backing away from him and committing to Thompson as their true guy?
Oh, man. I mean, okay, so Lindgren, 31 years old, so the age is a little bit different there. He has basically the same amount of experience. Granted, it's a little bit more spread out. He had that journeyman sort of start to things with the Habs and the Blues before finding a home in Washington. I mean, what's a good number for Lindgren? Like, if he's sitting there going, hey, I have a career save percentage of 908, you just gave Logan Thompson 5.8. Like, is Lindgren wrong for maybe wanting $4 million? Like, again, you mentioned the weak free agent market. That can be kind of you can look at either side of the coin there. You can say it's weak because there aren't a lot of teams who are going to be looking for starters, so who knows what the market's going to look like. Or you can sit there and say, hey, a guy like Charlie Lindgren, if there's a team out there who's looking for a goalie, maybe he does get paid. I don't know what happens with Lindgren. Like, if you're Washington, you can't give him $3 to $4 million, then be committing $9 million to those 2 guys for the next however many years. I don't know.
Yeah, I think money talks, right? $5.85 million is not like 1A, 1B money. That's okay. We're committing to a starter. And if you're Charlie Lindgren's camp now, it's like, okay, how many games am I going to start going forward? How many games am I going to start next year? If it's $5.85 million for Thompson, does that mean my ceiling is now 30 starts? And what if a team comes calling in free agency that wants to let me start 40 games? So I do wonder what it means for Charlie Lindgren. Very interesting.
Let's continue along, dig into our Dominion Lending Center's poll question a little bit here. We'll get to the results in a minute, but the question is, who will be the next big name to get moved? Obviously, the Mikko Rantanen news shocked the hockey world over the weekend, and now I'm kind of itching. I'm like an addict. I want another hit here. Give me another big move, but the JT Miller rumors are not going anywhere. When Rantanen was getting moved, it started to pop up that, hey, the Canucks are still listening on Elias Pettersson to some extent here. Last year, Elias Lindholm was one of the top targets on Frank's board, and he ended up getting moved on January 31st. It's January 28th today. The idea that some team could sit there and look to jump the market either as an aggressive buyer or as an aggressive seller, it's not that crazy of a thought when you look at some of the big names that are out there, a Miller, a Pettersson, even someone like a Brock Nelson, who we just talked about. Do you think there's a chance one of these teams, Matt, jumps in and goes, you know what, let's just make the move now?
I do think so, especially because we're getting close to the Four Nations break. It might make sense to make that deal just for the player's personal life to kind of get their ducks in a row if they're not playing in the tournament, although Brock Nelson is playing in the tournament. To me, as I said before, I don't know if he's going to be the first one just because of Lou Lamoriello, even though he should be. The demand is so high league-wide for what he brings to the table. JT Miller, we know there's a true urgency in Vancouver. That situation is just so untenable, but that's a hard contract to figure out. It's a complicated deal. He's got so many years left. He's 31 years old, $8 million. I'm looking at the Pittsburgh Penguins right now. Maybe it doesn't qualify as a big name, but impactful. Marcus Pettersson, defenseman, is the name I'm looking at. I think we know now that the Penguins are cooked, and there will be a market for Pettersson. He's 28 years old. He's a good middle six shutdown guy, can do a little bit of everything. Every team, almost every contender could use a guy like that. The only question is, at 28, like, could he still be part of the solution in Pittsburgh? He's not that old. So I think it comes down to whether Kyle Dubas wants to extend him. But if I'm the Penguins, admit defeat. You are absolutely cooked and put him on the block.
Yeah, the team I'd be looking at to maybe make a splash is Buffalo. They got 3 of the top 15 names on Frank's board, and all 3 of them are young guys who come with some element of team control, whether it's a Bowen Byram pending RFA, a Dylan Cousins, a guy who has term, or even Jack Quinn, who came in at number 14, another pending RFA. Like, Buffalo is probably cooked, but I could also see Kevin Adams going, you know what, before the Four Nations face off, let's take one more shot at this thing. Let's try to make a move to rattle the cages a little bit, get the room a little bit more motivated. But again, they're probably hopeless. But just because they have those pieces with term, I look at Buffalo and it's like, okay, those aren't traditional rentals where you'd be waiting till the last second to see how the market develops. There is maybe some motivation to make a move quicker.
Yeah, I think so. And Jack Quinn to me is a very interesting buy low. If you just look at his track record in junior and in the AHL, he was a scorer. Usually guys who are scorers at every single stop, they continue that trend. So I do think there's some untapped potential there. In terms of the bigger names like Dylan Cousins, I don't know. I just get the sense that Kevin Adams is a deer in the headlights, man. He just doesn't know what to do because there's the history. There's a story right now on Daily Faceoff from Anthony DeMarco mentioning that he feels burned by pieces Buffalo have traded that became Stanley Cup winners like Sam Reinhart, Jack Eichel. So there's sort of just a sense that he's frozen. And I look at pieces like Cousins. I wonder if that's a piece that's going to get traded in the summer by the next GM of the Buffalo Sabres. Hint, hint.
Yeah, I kind of pick up what you're putting down there. Let's keep cruising along with the show and get to our big segment for the day. It's the next wave, and it's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. You can check out their large selection of Canadian lab-grown diamonds and mined diamonds online at charmdiamondcenters.com, or you can apply for a Charm Diamond Flexity card today and get approved for no interest financing on your purchase in minutes. Always a pleasure to welcome our boy Stephen Ellis into the program. And let's keep the deadline talk going, Stephen. Which team do you think could maybe dip into their pool of futures the hardest and be the most aggressive as we approach the March 7th deadline?
Well, I want to go with the Washington Capitals. And I didn't include any of their players on my prospects to watch list, but that's a team that really should be all in this year, because with Alex Ovechkin being 39, he'd be 40 on his next deal next year, of course. When you look at that, you're going to want to capitalize on that before he retires. And if that means trading someone like an Andrew Cristall or trading someone, heck, like a Cole Hudson, maybe one of these guys who can go out there and get a really nice return, you might as well go and do something like that. So keep an eye on the Capitals. Again, I'm not saying they're close to anything. I'm not an insider. I'm not Frank, but they've got enough prospects, and they're in a situation here where if they're going to win with Ovechkin, they got to do it now. They can move some pieces.
It's interesting too. I'm looking at Brendan Brisson in Vegas just because of the history. So they've had 10 first-round picks, and 2 of them were traded before they made the pick. 6 of them were traded post-pick, and they have 2 remaining. It was Trevor Connolly and Brendan Brisson. So it feels like it's tradition for Vegas to trade Brisson. But Stephen, I wanted to ask you about someone who is not really a prospect, but he is an interesting story. Dominic Shine. He's such a non-household name that I thought he was Dominic Shine, some Czech guy. But no, he's North American, made his Red Wings debut last night, 31 years old. crazy, interesting story, late bloomer. What can you tell us about him? Because admittedly, I don't know much.
Yeah, like this is a guy that was draft eligible like when I was still in high school, like 2011. So it's been a while since he actually kind of really grew on the scene here. And you look at his college career. Actually, we'll start even farther. He's born in Michigan. He played with the Little Caesars and then the CompuWare minor hockey programs, two very powerful ones. Then he goes and plays 4 years at Northern Michigan. Not exactly a hockey powerhouse. It's kind of, you look at Michigan State and the University of Michigan, like, Northern Michigan kind of gets lost a little bit there, but he had a couple good seasons, never a point per game player, but just always really consistent, one of the best players. Goes and spends the next couple years with the Grand Rapids Griffins. Really wasn't much more than just a tough guy. Like, oh, he might get 25 or 30 points. Like last year he had 33. Well, this year he's a legitimate star in the AHL. He's got 32 points in 40 games. He's also still one of the more physical players, but he really kind of grew on early as the season went on where, yeah, like this guy might legitimately be a nice depth piece for the Detroit Red Wings. So I think, will he play a lot of games? I don't expect it, but was it really cool to see him play for his hometown team, the team he cheered for in a state he never really left beyond a couple years in the USHL? Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's really awesome story. I wanted to ask you as well about an actual prospect for the Red Wings. This is so interesting because I've been tough on the Red Wings in recent years, claiming they didn't have a true center prospect that can make a difference. I was tough on Marco Kasper, wondering what his ceiling was. And now he's kind of sneaking into the Calder discussion. He's been really hot over the last month, playing great with Lucas Raymond and Dylan Larkin, and he's playing on the wing. So I'm very curious for you. Are you seeing something that indicates his ceiling maybe is higher than we thought, or at least I thought? And what's your take?
I think it's still a little too early because you look there, it's not incredible numbers, but he still has 3 goals and 4 points in his last 5 games. And I believe he's sitting at 11 points in his last 13 games, which makes him the highest scoring forward or rookie forward in the last month. So really promising to see there. I know that's a guy that when the Red Wings drafted him, he was never going to be this flashy player, but he was going to be a reliable two-way threat who can go out there and be a bit more physical. And it felt like last year, around the midpoint of the season, that's when he really started to figure it out in the AHL. He looked much more comfortable. He learned how to use the smaller ice to his advantage. And now we're seeing him, it was a bit of some baby steps early on, but right now we're seeing a guy who's playing with so much confidence, can play a bunch of different roles for this Red Wings team. And I do think he should be a pretty decent top 6 option for them moving forward.
I was muted. Wow.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, is he only muted for me, or does Steven also not hear?
Steven, you had an article about NHL prospects in the NCAA. Tell us about one who's standing out.
I got to go with Jacob Fowler, a guy who's just put up some outstanding numbers this year. He's leading the NCAA of 6 shutouts. And you can look at that and say, well, he's playing for a team that's got Ryan Leonard and James Haggins and Gabe Perreault. Of course, they're going to be good, but there's been a lot of games that he's had to go out there and save for them. And you look at those numbers, fantastic. For Fowler, he looks like a legitimate goalie of the future for the Montreal Canadiens. And when you're putting up those type of numbers year after year, not just in the NCAA, but in the USHL before that, like it's truly remarkable. Like, I feel like we kind of like Hampton Slalinski this year at the World Juniors. We're looking at Jacob Fowler, and if he was born at any other time and not in the same era of Trey Augustine, like we'd be talking about him probably being a World Junior superstar of just how good of a goalie prospect he is. So Canadiens fans have a lot to be excited about. I know it must be weird cheering for a team named Boston, but Jacob Fowler gives you a reason to watch them because he's just been so good.
I got a bonus one for you. And Pat, if we flash back up that board that kind of had all the prospects listed that Steven talked about in his article, who's one name on here that you think the team's got to be maybe real cautious about moving on from? We'll call it the Forsberg for ERAT award, a prospect on here who it's like, okay, they might move him and they'll probably regret it.
My first instinct was Simon Nemec, but I'd actually go with Rutger McGroarty, and that's because, yeah, he's not looking really good right now in the AHL. I think he's like 7th in team scoring for Wilkes-Barre, which is not a great team. But when you look at him, I still think he brings a lot to the table that will be really exciting the next couple of years. I, for one, thought he should have been playing first line to start the NHL season, and that's because Crosby could have used the guy that's got that skill, but got that tenacity and likes to take guys off his game. I felt like that would have been a really good mix there. So Penguins, they just got Rutger McGroarty. He has been a name that, at least when I was talking to some guys of the World Juniors, a lot of people thought that he might be one of those guys that could potentially be moved out. We'll see if that happens. But yeah, I think the Penguins don't have a lot of prospects. They do need to eventually get better at a certain point here. Trading him, I think, would be a mistake unless you're getting someone who's just as good around the same age, which might be hard to do.
Yeah. Stephen Ellis, Daily Faceoff prospect analyst. Appreciate you popping on. We'll chat again next week.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Let's move along to our Dominion Lending Center's poll question. Is your mortgage up for renewal? Lock in the best rates by speaking with one of their mortgage experts at dominionlending.ca. Let's get to some from, let's get to our poll question results. 57%, Matt, saying JT Miller will be the next name moved. I'm not surprised by that. I'm more surprised that 22% are saying Elias Pettersson. I just don't think there's a chance they move him in season.
I don't think so either. And if they do, I think it's something they're going to live to regret, because if you think about the chemistry problems with JT Miller, at least from what I've heard over the last couple of years, it doesn't just extend to Elias Pettersson. So if Miller's still there, the problem isn't necessarily resolved. You still have JT Miller, you still have some tension, a guy whose personality doesn't always jive with everybody. So not only do you lose Elias Pettersson in that scenario, you still have the Miller chemistry situation, which I don't think is automatically resolved by a trade. So if Vancouver sells its soul and trades Pettersson instead, oh boy, it's going to be scary. You better get a damn good return.
Yeah, Brian is in with a question for us. He says, is Utah still a realistic option to make the playoffs, and could they make a big swing? And I'll be honest, I don't think those two are even really tied together. I'm not sure if Utah is still a realistic option for the playoffs. You're 6 points back of the Calgary Flames. The Flames have a game in hand on you. I just don't really see it, especially with Vancouver still sitting above them. St. Louis is above them. I know technically not by points percentage, but I do still think even if they're not a realistic playoff option, they could make a big swing. They have cap space, they have assets. If there is a player out there who they think can help them down the line or who comes with term, I'm looking at the boys from Buffalo. I think Bill Armstrong could absolutely take a swing.
Yeah, I think that's the type of scenario we can envision. We know that he gave a great interview recently with Frank Saravalli, indicating that this team was at least closer to a buyer posture than not. It's tough because there is the little problem of the standings. I feel bad for Utah because they've had some tough breaks with the injuries to their decor. Just seems like they have not been able to have that full group healthy the entire season. That's held them back, but they still have some promising signs. Clayton Keller having another great year. Dylan Guenther was breaking out, then he gets hurt. So tough breaks, but overall, they've amassed so many picks and prospects. I call it the critical mass. You don't really need that many more first-round picks and prospects. You can start moving out a couple, just like they did in the Sergachev trade, because it's time to start ascending in the standings. So maybe they're a team that could go after someone like Dylan Cousins. That would be an interesting fit for me.
A deal that I kind of think about, and I was just making sure I had the dates right here, but on February 28th last season, or was it 2 years ago now? I think, it was 2 years ago now. The Washington Capitals traded for Rasmus Sandin, and it was kind of like, why are the Capitals giving up a first for Rasmus Sandin? And you flash forward to now, he's playing on the top pair with John Carlson most nights. Again, that kind of a move for Utah. Find a young player under team control who your pro scouts are high on, and make the move. Again, you have a zillion draft picks. Frank and I talk about this all the time. You can't keep them all. Go make a splash if you're Bill Armstrong. Let's move along, get to our daily bets for Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Couple of plays for tonight. I love the Avalanche on the puck line against the Islanders. I kind of like finding these teams that I view as bad who've won a couple. I like fading them. So the Avalanche, they've been playing well. Got a comeback win over the weekend against the Rangers. They're taking on an Islanders team that, they're coming off a win too, but I don't mind fading them. They are well under 500 on home ice this season as well. And Yuri Kulich is my shot prop today. 3+ shots on goal is paying out pretty close to 2-1, actually. I like the spot for him. 17 shots in his last 3 games, or in his last 5 games, and has hit in 3 of his last 5. So give me Kulich on the shot prop, Islanders on the puck line tonight, and we will wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time. Wanted to give some love to our friend Irf Gaffar and his new show, Down to Earth, and he had a really interesting chat with Travis Green the other day. Here is a sneak peek.
We've seen players take leaves of absence for personal reasons. We've seen mental health obviously become a huge proponent in the NHL and what different teams are doing with hockey talks and that sort of thing. How much do you and your coaching staff take into consideration if a player's not having a good day, whether it's on the ice or off the ice and things like that? And how much do you talk to your guys when it comes to stuff like that?
Do we talk about mental health a lot daily? No.
Yeah.
But do we take into consideration where a person is at? Yes. There's times where you might be upset with a player and how he's playing, but maybe you can tell that he already knows it, and you are only adding to the burden, to the stress, is something that you really have to pay attention, because ultimately we're trying to get our players to play the best that they can. And, sometimes it's a heavier thumb, sometimes it's lighter, and that's a big art of coaching, I think.
New episode of Down to Earth going to debut later today over on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. Thought it was interesting. The Senators team, they're in a bit of an interesting spot here. And I wasn't maybe huge on the Travis Green hiring at first, but I will say I've warmed up to it. I think he's one of those coaches who walks that line of being able to relate and talk to the new school kind of players without just totally being like a softy players coach kind of thing, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of reflects what he was as a player, right? So I remember him because he was here in Toronto for a while when they had some contending teams, and he was tight with his teammates, but he also had a hard-nosed game, was willing to sort of do the dirty job. So it kind of fits his coaching style. And I think Ottawa needed someone that was just a little bit of a hard ass to kind of just get this team that's had so many young players that haven't had big time experience yet, get them with a little kick in the butt. And it seems to be working so far.
Yeah, there you go. You can find that on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. Another reason to be subscribed. Matt, great stuff. Appreciate you as always filling in. Pat Puff, our producer, bang up job. Everyone in the YouTube, you were great. Tomorrow, Colby Cohen's going to be sliding in next to me on Daily Faceoff Live. We will chat with everybody once again on Wednesday at noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content, from daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.